Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. Factoring day 4, and we're going to be using the AC Xbox tool to help us factor. The trinomials that we're dealing with are in the form of ax squared plus bx plus c, or as we know it, standard form in that decreasing exponent, starting with our largest exponent and going down. So, where a, b, and c are the coefficients or the constants, all that really means is that these are my numbers. Okay? So for how to factor, the first thing we want to do is we always want to check to see if there's a GCF that we could pull out. See if there's something in common between all of our terms that's easy to pull out of there. If it does have a GCF, all you're going to do is divide it out and leave the GCF outside the parentheses in the final answer. After that, or if there was no GCF, the remaining expression in the parentheses will be broken down into parts using the following setup. My steps for factoring polynomials. Step 1 is to make sure your trinomial is in the correct standard form, or ax squared plus bx plus c. Again, that's just showing that my exponents are decreasing as I go from left to right. For step 2, we want to multiply my AC and put it at the top of my x. So I'm going to write my x over here. This is the Xbox method that we're going to be using. So once I have my x, I multiply my AC, my A times my C, and put it up top. After that, step 3 tells me to put the B in the bottom. So we're going to be using these values to help us find our factors. For step 4, we want to find the two numbers that multiply to AC and add to B. And each of those are going to go on the sides of my box. If you have a calculator available to you, you can use your calculator to help find your factors that multiply to your AC and add to your B. You're just going to graph your y equals AC over x and then go to your table to figure out which sum up to or which add up to your B term. If you don't have a calculator, it's just going to require you to do a little bit of thinking. Next, we're going to rewrite our polynomial and factor using grouping, just like our last lesson. Let's give it a try. The first thing that I want to do with this problem is to check and see if there's an easy GCF that I could pull from these three terms. Since they don't have anything in common, there's nothing I could pull out, so I have to use my Xbox method of factoring. I am in standard form because I notice my exponents decrease as I go left to right, so we're good to start. I need to know what my A, B, and C values all are, so even though I can't see it, there is a 1 in front of my x squared. That makes my A value 1, my B value 5, and my C value negative 24. So step 2 for factoring means I need to multiply my A times my C and put that at the top of my x. So 1 times negative 24 just results in a negative 24. For the bottom of my x, I'm just going to bring down my B value, or my 5. For the two side parts, I need to figure out what multiplies to my negative 24 and what adds to 5. So I need two factors that multiply to negative 24 and add to 5. Knowing that this is a negative, I know one of my two numbers has to be negative. So this is where a little guess and check comes in if you don't have a calculator. So you might start by saying, well, I know 6 times negative 4 does get me negative 24. However, 6 plus negative 4 does not result in 5. So at that point, I'm back to the drawing board and I have to find a couple more factors. So what you should end up on after looking through some of the factors is you should realize that 8 times negative 3 gets me that negative 24, and 8 plus negative 3 also results in that 5. So I've successfully found the factors that work for my Xbox. Now we just need to rewrite my expression. So start by bringing down my A term and my C term. So I have my x squared and my negative 24. And what we're doing with that B term is we're splitting it up using the two factors that we just found. So it's important to realize that there is still an x with each one of these terms. Because it was a 5x, we're just rewriting it as a plus 8x minus 3x. And now we can use the factoring by grouping that we learned in the previous lesson. So I'm going to split this up into two sets of parentheses and find the GCF in both. So for my first set of parentheses, my GCF between the x squared and the positive 8x is x. So I can divide out my x here, place that out front, and I'm left with an x plus 8. Up next, I need my GCF for the second binomial. So I'm looking, and I know that I want to get an x plus 8 to match up. I need to have that matching binomial here when I factor. So in order to make this positive, I know I'm going to have to divide by a negative. Luckily, negative 3 and negative 24 both have that negative 3 in common. So I can pull out a negative 3. There's no variable with that 24 or negative 24, so I can't pull out any x's, so my GCF is just going to be negative 3. When I pull out my negative 3, I'm left with an x plus 8, which is exactly what we wanted, because now my binomials match. At this point, I'm going to pull out that matching binomial of 8, or x plus 8, and then my second binomial is made up of what I have left over, which is my x minus 3. And we've successfully factored using the Xbox method. For this last question, we're going to run through the same process. We're going to start by checking to see if there's any easy GCF we can pull, and notice that there's nothing in common between these three terms. So we have to use our Xbox method. So we'll put that in right off the bat. Looking, we are in standard form because our exponents are decreasing left to right, so we're all good there. Now we need to know that my 8 is 3, my b is 10, and my c is 8. So my first step of this process is multiplying my a times my c. So a times c is 3 times 8 here, which is my 24. That goes in the top of my x box. And then on the bottom, we're just going to put our b, which is 10. So we need two numbers that multiply to 24 and add to 10. Again, you're going to go through that process of elimination if you don't have a calculator. If you do have a calculator, just go ahead and find your factors, and we should all end up on the same factors of 6 and 4. 6 times 4 is going to get us 24, and 6 plus 4 is going to add to 10. Next step is just rewriting our expression. So we're going to bring down our a term and our c term. So I have 3x squared, and then I have my plus 8 to close that off. And we're breaking up that b term into my two terms of 6x and 4x. So I could write my plus 6x and plus 4x right in that expression. Now we're on to factoring by grouping. So I'm going to group my first two terms, and then I'm also going to group my second two terms. The GCF for my first term between 3x squared and 6x, you should see that you could pull out a 3x from both terms. So divided by 3x there, divided by 3x there. I'm going to write that out front as 3x, and then what I have left over is just an x plus 2. The GCF for my second two terms, or my second binomial, is just a 4. Because my 8 doesn't have any variables, so I can't pull out any x's. I can just pull out a 4. So down here I'll have that 4 out front, and then I'm left with an x plus 2. Once again, we can double check. My binomials do match, so that's good. We can pull that binomial right out front, so I have an x plus 2 leading off this problem, x plus 2. And then what I have left over is just my 3x and my plus 4. That's going to be my second binomial, 3x plus 4. I've now successfully factored using the Xbox method, and I am all set with this problem. You can check using the box method if you want to make sure your expression is equivalent to your starting expression. Be sure to try the two problems on the right side of your page for homework and have them ready for class tomorrow.